Right, guys. As I said before, we got the first snow here, and apart from the course, the power's just gone off. It's just like, come on, guys, get yourselves together. It's not that much snow, but anyway. So I've got the fire roaring now, so it'll be toasty warm in the here in about half an hour. I usually try and refrain from putting the fire on. I have the electric fire on, which is now gone off, which keeps me warm. But you can hear the fire roaring now, probably in the background and spitting. I've got some oak now. I want to get rid of the oak because it just doesn't burn. It burns slow. If it's good for like kind of an overnight fire or whatever, but like it's just not as good. We have beech here, and it burns hot, and it's kind of. I'm mixing it in now. The beech, although some of it isn't fully seasoned, it needs another summer. But I'm mixing it in, and it makes a difference. Like last night, I mixed a few beech logs in, but I've got quite a bit of this oak knocking about, and if anything, I want to get through it now and get rid of it. It's okay, but it just doesn't. It's not a. It does and it's okay for when it's not too cold either. Like really, really cold because it doesn't overheat the room. So that's another thing. It's good for. Anyway, these are the little things about the fires. But the wood's very important, and especially on the seasoning and everything like that. But it is seasoned now. It is burning a lot better. It won't burn hardly if it's not seasoned. The oak, it's hopeless. It's so dense, and it just burns itself out sometimes. Yeah, and you've got to move it about more. With the beech, here's the power coming back on. I don't know whether to extinguish the fire now. Till later. Save a few logs. So the power's back on, miraculously, and so yeah. So there's a lot going on now about the cost of living and money and all the rest of it. And there's always been a little bit of chatter about and I don't really talk about it for some various reasons, but like I'll just talk about the outline of it because a lot of people are kind of maybe interested now or getting interested or whatever. They usually do when it's so it's Bitcoin, and it's at a kind of high price at the moment. And we've been being told forever by various people, and one of the main ones in Europe anyway is Christine Lagarde, who's a convicted fraudster with using fiat money. And one of the things they say about Bitcoin is it's used by criminals. And I've got a funny feeling that she's got a big stack somewhere because she knows an awful lot about it. You can tell. You can tell by listening to these people. She knows all about it. And if she does, she'll have a stack of it somewhere. And she has, obviously. To me, for those who can see these people. Christine Lagarde, and she's convicted of embezzling and all sorts. I don't know what it was for. And now she's the head of the ECB, I think, or was the Central European Bank, and she kind of flip flops on Bitcoin, which these people do to suit them, and she wants to bring in this CBDC, which is. It'll be a central bank run crypto. In effect, it'll be a stable coin. That's all it is. But it won't be a proper one like Bitcoin because they'll control the They can control the supply. And when you create a coin like a CBDC, you can give yourself a load of coins, and that's what a load of the other cryptos do. They call it a pre-sale or a pre-mine, where all the coins are mined before they're issued. And guess who owns most of them? Well, the people who make them, people who come up with the coin, and then they just sit on them. And when it goes up, they feed them in under the radar slowly, and they live off it. Cardano is a good example of that, where the team owns a lot of the coin, which has been criticised for, but still doing okay anyway. But Bitcoin's different. Bitcoin's very, very different than all these things. And there's a couple of other coins as well, which are pure proof of work with no pre-mine, no pre-sell. Because they also have pre-sell, which they had a lot of ICOs. It caused a lot of hassle actually to Bitcoin, because it was lumped in with all this stuff, which is, a lot of it is pyramid stuff and all the rest of it, this proof of stake stuff, and it really is, and it does rely on people staking and all this, and then they get them in. And the biggest example of that was Ethereum. They had this great big, they changed to proof of stake, and then they had a big stake, but the guy in the driving seat who came up with all this, he was asked, "Are you staking all your coins?" And he said, "No." Vitalik Buterin, and that was at that point where I said, I'm not staking anything if he's not. No way. And it turned out to be a bit of a disaster, really. Ethereum, it was going okay before that, because it was proof of work, and it was mined, Now it's proof of stake, and that brings into other things like regulations and anyway. So if you want to understand Bitcoin, and now there's these guys like Peter Schiff, and there's a guy that I watch, and the reason I watch him is I like the opposite. I like people explaining the opposite to what I do and what I believe, because you get the other side of the coin, and in this case literally a coin. There's always the other side of a coin. Well, this is a coin, and so they keep going on about Bitcoin and its computers and on a screen and all the rest of it. Now, if anybody knows, really, first of all, you have to go away and learn about unbacked fiat money and central banking system. And these banks and people, if you went to 90 out of 100 people in the UK and said, who prints the money? They'll say the government, and they don't. They don't. Well, in a literal sense, they do. The Treasury, they print the actual printed notes and mint the minted coins. That's as far as they go. The rest of the money is issued by central banks, private banks. And when they say they're printing money, what they're doing is inventing debt, and that's where the thin air comes from. Bitcoin doesn't come out of thin air. Bitcoin needs power, and computer power and electricity power doesn't come out from nowhere. You can't just do what they do. When you invent a mortgage, which is that's the best explanation of how the money works and where it comes from and what printing money is. And it's not printing money, it's kind of inventing money out of nowhere, thin air. And that's interest, which you buy. When you buy a house, I'll just go through this, and this is how it works, and this is where the money comes from, the new money. You produce it for them by taking on debt. That's how most of it comes about. there's money printing, which I've just said the Treasury does, and then there's quantitative easing after that. But the main part which you invent now, if you just listen to this one scenario, and then go away and there's loads of stuff, and just put how money is created on the internet, on YouTube, and it's all there. They'll explain it. But I'm just going to go through briefly here, where this is how money comes about, and this is where it's the opposite of what they tell you. Bitcoin doesn't come out. You can't put Bitcoin into this equation, what I'm going to explain now. Only unbacked fiat money. And this is where it comes from. You go into a room and you're going to buy a house, let's call it £100,000. Keep it simple. 100,000, right, or dollars, whatever. You're going to buy a house for 100,000, but you're not. Right, so you go into a room and there's no other doors. There's one door in, one door out. 2 computers and the deeds to the house, what you're going to buy. And you've got the seller or the seller's representative, and you and your representative, your lawyer or whoever it is. Usually it's not the lawyer, usually it's the lender, and the lawyers are doing the stuff in the background. So you're there and you're going to buy this house for £100,000, right? So you go in and you can look around everywhere you want, in all the corners, on all the shelves, and there won't be any £100,000 there that they're going to lend to you, and you're going to hand over to the other guy, the buyer or the seller. There's no £100,000 anywhere in that room before you go in and sign the papers. And what you're signing for is not 100,000. You're signing for 100 plus all the interest for 25 or 30 years, whichever it may be, or 20. Right? So that's what you're signing up for. When you go in there, you're signing up that you're going to pay, let's call it 100 plus interest, which is 7-8% or whatever it is, that you're going to then pay after 30 years. You will have paid this amount, and you can easily work that out, because you can just go on a mortgage calculator online and it'll tell you. And there's fees involved as well. To start with, you've got to pay them to do this, to create debt for you, and you're creating the debt, not them. You are. So what you're doing is you go in the room, right, and there's these papers to sign. You might have already signed them, right? And what you're signing up for is the mortgage. This is the mortgage offer. And you're going to pay them, so let's call it £400,000 over 30 years. So you're not borrowing 1,000 or anything like that. Or nothing like that. They're going to give this guy, they're going to invent this, because you are promising to pay now. And that's like you're creating this banknote, because all them are promises, like the $1 bill or the £1 note. That's a note. That's what it is. To promise to pay the bearer, but there's nothing to promise them anymore, because it's not backed by anything. You're promising them to pay this, but there's nothing to pay them. Before, it was a promise and it was linked to gold, and they could retrieve. You could go and retrieve the gold for the note. And that's how it worked, when it was backed by something, right? So you've just now invented, out of thin air, you've invented £400,000. That's now in existence, and they can go and sell that debt, and they do. They go and sell the debt to somebody else, some bank or financial institution, who can use it for leverage and all the rest of this stuff. Because you've promised to pay, and if you don't pay, they'll have something on you. They'll have the house, the deeds, they leave that room with the deeds to the house. Or if the deeds aren't there, I mean, they've got the deeds, before you go in the room or whatever. But that's, to keep it simple, the deeds are then taken away by them, right? And then if you don't pay for the whole 30 years, every single payment, you're not getting a house. You're not going to own it at the end. And it's only on the last day that you own it. So you're a real serious risk, and especially towards the end. Imagine you've paid 350 grand out of the 400, and you start defaulting, or you lose your leg, or your job, or your marriage breaks down, or whatever, or you fall on hard times and you can't pay. You lose your house after paying it. You don't get your 350 grand back. They keep that as well as the house. What a deal. So there's where the money comes from. But the moment you walk in that room and you promise to pay over the 30 years, that's what printing money is called. That's debt. You've invented debt in the form of interest. And the only thing where interest comes from is the passage of time that they give you, where you can pay that money to them. But you've got to pay it all to them, all of it. Every penny of the house is not yours. It's not going to be yours at the end. And that's where the money comes from. So anytime you get debt, that's including credit cards or car loans, anything like that. It's the same scenario. As soon as you create an interest situation, you've created that money. That interest doesn't exist yet physically, but it will do as soon as you start paying it. And if you don't pay it, they just take the asset back. And like the house, and they can start again. Then they can get somebody else to promise them to pay them 400 grand for the house over 30 years. The same house if you don't pay. It's a pretty bad deal for you. So that's why you want to be paying off however quickly you can. Pay off these mortgages and don't get into debt. So that's where the money comes from. So with Bitcoin, you can't put Bitcoin into that equation because they haven't got the regulations and that where they can just substitute Bitcoin into that equation and put the interest on the Bitcoin, because they can't pull, like they can pull 400 grand out of thin air, and the 100 grand which doesn't exist, which you're going to pay. It doesn't exist until you've signed the papers. The 100 grand doesn't exist. There is no 100 grand. So you say you're going to pay 400, and then you get 100 of it goes to them. But in return for that, the lender gets the deeds to the house, which are worth 400 grand to them over 30 years. And you're going to pay it. And whatever else goes. And you've got to insure this property. And you have got to make sure the property doesn't fall down. In some cases, because you get compulsory purchase orders. So you've got to maintain it. And you've got to insure it as well. So the whole thing is like everything's against you. And you think you own a house. Well, a lot of people do. They think they own a house. Even, 20 years, they're house proud, and this house they own. They don't. They don't own any one single brick of it, and they could have rebuilt the house and then put a new roof on, which most people will within 30 years, or less, and replace all the windows and the heating system and all that. That goes with the house. When you sell it as your asset, so you're not only paying 400 grand, you're paying all that money to maintain it as well. So that's why it makes sense to get a house bought and paid for as soon as you possibly can, and don't start taking if you take mortgages out, they call it going up the ladder. They invented that one as well. And all you do is start from you're returning. If it's monopoly on a board, you're going back to go. You know, when it says that, you go back to go, do not collect £200. That's what it is. When you take mortgage after mortgage after mortgage, you're returning to because when you start paying a mortgage, you don't pay anything off for years and years and years. You pay about 10 quid off for the first year, off the house, off the principal, and all the rest is the interest for these people. And because they've got the house, they own the house, and you're looking after it for them, not you, them. And it's a long road. 30 years now. 20 was like kind of, you could envisage that, or even 15, and you can actually pay a mortgage off quite quickly if you get a mortgage where you can pay it off. The current account mortgages are fantastic. You can just pay them off fast as you can. I had one of them, and you can pay it off super quick, or super slow as well. If you go for an interest only on a current account mortgage, you'd hardly pay anything. That's what I opted to do, because I had a plan to sell anyway after about maybe 5, 6, 7 years, up to 10, and that's what I did. And in between times, if you pay the bare minimum that you can, you'd end up in a better position if you're going to sell. Otherwise, paying off on a repayment mortgage, you don't pay anything off the actual principal for years and years. All the bit of money goes off at the end. And that they do that because they know you're going to change mortgages in between, and maybe sell the house in between. And that's where they've got you to start again, through paying all that money up front, kind of thing. And that's how it works. And that's where the money comes. That's money printing. And it's debt. It's a debt-based fiat system. That's what it is. And the debt is the interest created. That's the money. That's the new money created every day when people have debt. And it relies on debt. And that's why this cycle should come to an end now, because it'll always go to an end, the fiat cycle. And it's done it hundreds and hundreds of times. The Weimar Republic, the Zimbabwe, the Lebanese pound, Venezuela, they've all gone because sometimes the system breaks down, which it looks like it's doing now in the UK. It's quite worrying, really, that the house prices are detaching from the affordable payments, shall we say, from the wages. If the payments become unaffordable, so you can't afford them with all the other expenses, then it'll break down. It's got to be affordable. Like your chunk of your wages every month, if it's affordable, then it's palatable, actually. And it always was in my days. Like, say you were earning, just for example, say you were earning £1,000 a month, take home, right? And your mortgage was 200. Then you could do that, 50 quid a week, and it was palatable. And your rent, if you paid rent, it was always on par with buying and renting, more or less. Sometimes it was cheaper to buy. In my case, it was cheaper to buy the house I had. So you got to look at all these things and understand them before you go, and then go and have a look at Bitcoin, how it works, and why it goes up in value. And a lot of it is, it's not going up in value. The dollar is going down, mainly the dollar. The purchasing power of the dollar and all the other currencies, actually. And the euro is like slipping fast, even against the pound at the moment. So you got to learn the fiat money system. Go and look it up. Where does money come from? Who makes the money? Who prints the money? And all the rest of it, and you'll find out then. But well, you should have found out here now because I've just explained it. But like, don't rely on a man in a hat in Bulgaria sitting in a scarf. Someone in a suit will tell you, you know, if you only listen. Well, most people don't want to know. Most people don't want to know. They don't care. But they're missing. A lot of people have probably missed, and I know a lot of people have who I've told because they haven't done it in the past, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, probably 8 years ago now. Said, have a look at this. And a lot of people have missed the best opportunity that they'll ever see, which is Bitcoin. It's still an opportunity, I think. And there's still a few cryptos as well, which you could like kind of gamble on. But Bitcoin's not a gamble. No more than fiat money. Fiat money's a bigger gamble now because they're all coming to the end of the cycle. And you know, I sleep at night, but I worry about the bank. I've got euros in the bank here, and that's what I worry about. Fiat money. I don't worry about Bitcoin. Anyway, so that's in a nutshell. But don't take my word for it. But a lot of people have missed a lot of boats, and the train has left the station for a lot of people, and they could have been in such a good position now, just a few grand, you know. And they chose to like listen to the Christine Lagardes of the world, and whoever else was telling them, oh no, criminals use that. Well, all the criminals I know use fiat money. They always have done. You know, Bitcoin's traceable. It's on the ledger. So if they know the criminals, which they do, if when they catch them, they know what the address is, and they know what they can go back then every transaction they've ever done, and even in other cryptos except a few privacy coins, but they know the privacy money's gone in there, unless they start off with pure privacy money. That's what if you were a criminal, that's what you'd do. It wouldn't be Bitcoin. Bitcoin's transparent, the ultimate transparency. That's why they probably also don't like it. Corrupt politicians won't like Bitcoin because it's all traceable. It's all there. Once you know that guy's address, it's all traceable, all of it. Well, it's like you've got their bank account and public. It's on a public ledger. So, but the only thing you can do to keep it away from people is don't divulge your address, or use a different address every transaction, which you can do as well. Which is that's also kind of what you should do. But it's difficult. Then it's difficult for you to keep track of, really, sometimes. Then, without going into too much detail, but yeah. So study them both, and there's some really good people I follow on YouTube. But you've got to look into these things yourself. Go and do research. And the first thing to do is research your money system, the fiat money system, because it's not what a lot of people think it is. A lot of people think it's the government running it, and it's not. It's private banks. Governments have things to do with it, like, you know, would they sell bonds? But that's them. That's all that is them borrowing money from the Fed or whoever. They sell the bonds to them, you know. And there is another, like, quantitative easing is where they're lending money to their mates, you know. Anyway, but look it all up. Look up how does the fiat money system work. Be surprised. You will be surprised. Okay? And then look into Bitcoin.